Abstergo promised safety, exploration, entertainment. What they delivered was a medical slab with a needle in your arm and a machine that could permanently shatter your grip on reality if you stayed inside too long. Every desynchronization, every mission boundary, every checkpoint kick, that wasn't a bug. That was the Animus trying not to kill you. Today, we're breaking down every version of the Animus across the entire franchise, and the first one is the darkest. Animus Model 1.1 is not a gaming chair. It's a horizontal medical slab with an articulated head visor and a rotating glass panel suspended above the subject, closer to an MRI crossed with a projector than anything you would willingly climb into. It doesn't send you back in time, it forces your brain to relive someone else's life by reading DNA from your blood and pharmacologically linking your nervous system into a data stream. Desmond Miles has a catheter inserted into his arm every single session. This is a medical procedure, not a game. The HUD, mission objectives, synchronization percentage, the invisible walls around locations Altair never visited, all of that is in-universe. The Animus constantly calculates whether Desmond's actions match the genetic record. Diverge too far, the system crashes. Every mechanic players dismissed as a design limitation in 2007 was canonically a symptom of a machine that could kill you, and it did kill someone. Subject 16 Clay Kaczmarek was forced into the Animus for days at a time. He experienced hallucinations, painted warnings in his own blood across his cell walls, and eventually died. Abstergo knew the risks. They kept going anyway. The bleeding effect bleeds Altair's skills directly into Desmond's waking life, his movement, his combat instincts, his eagle vision. They accidentally turned their own prisoner into a trained assassin. The entire goal was extracting Piece of Eden locations Altair hid after 1191. The machine is a torture device and the most effective intelligence tool the Templars ever built. The side effect set the entire franchise in motion. At least Desmond only had one ghost in his head. Wait until you see what happens when the assassins steal the blueprints and start upgrading. Animus Model 2.0. The original Animus was a glorified dentist's chair with delusions of grandeur. It worked technically, but it was clunky, stationary, and about as subtle as a satellite dish bolted to your living room ceiling. Abstergo didn't care. It served its purpose. But when Desmond Miles entered the picture, the limitations started mattering a lot more. The Model 2.0 was the assassin's answer to all of that. Built by Sean, Rebecca, and the rest of the underground cell, this version ditched the bulky hardware and replaced it with something actually portable, running off a modified commercial base that Rebecca herself heavily customized. She called it Baby, which honestly tracks. You spend enough late nights fixing something, you start naming it things. Here's where it gets interesting. The 2.0 wasn't just a smaller version of the same machine, it was fundamentally smarter. The original Animus struggled to separate Desmond's consciousness cleanly from the ancestors he was reliving. The bleed between identities was dangerous, messy, and getting worse the longer he used it. The 2.0 introduced more sophisticated synchronization controls, letting Desmond push deeper into genetic memory without completely losing himself in the process, except it still happened. The bleeding effect wasn't fixed, it was just slightly better managed, which is a meaningful distinction when you're watching someone slowly forget which century they live in. Subject 16 understood this better than anyone. His sessions inside an earlier Animus had gone so far that he couldn't separate himself from his ancestors at all by the end. He left messages inside the machine itself, encoded in the system at a level that only someone experiencing the same unraveling would ever find. The 2.0 was stable enough that Desmond could access those messages. It was also stable enough that he could receive Minerva's direct transmission during the Ezio sequences, a moment that rewired the entire mythology of the franchise in about 90 seconds. The 2.0 didn't just upgrade the hardware, it upgraded what the story could do. Every major revelation in Assassin's Creed 2 passed through Rebecca's machine first. Animus Model 3.0, less a hardware redesign and more a complete software rewrite. Animus Model 3.0 keeps the existing chair rigs but rewrites the simulation engine to stream persistent open-world cities like Rome rather than loading individual mission environments. But that's not the compelling part. When Desmond falls into a coma after Brotherhood, his consciousness gets trapped inside a collapsing construct called Animus Island. The system attempts to reconcile simultaneous memory streams from Altair, Ezio, and Desmond himself. roughly 900 years of intertwined memory running at once. Here's where it gets weird. Revelations presents nested memory experiences. Ezio watches Altair's memories through Isu memory seals, which Desmond in turn relives. An animus inside an animus, which is already what the player is doing through a game engine that mirrors animus logic. You're 3 levels deep without realizing it. The system responds to the overload by partitioning Desmond's consciousness into discrete Desmond sequences, minimalistic geometry assembled from memory fragments, used as a cognitive repair program. It treats the bleeding effect as both the disease and the cure. The machine is essentially performing therapy by forcing Desmond to walk through his own broken mind, one abstract level at a time. Through this chaos, Revelations reveals how Altair reorganized the Levantine Brotherhood, created the Codex, and sealed himself inside the Masyaf library that Ezio later discovers. Ezio's story closes with him leaving a message addressed directly to Desmond, breaking the fourth wall inside the simulation. It's one of the few moments where the Animus stops pretending to be invisible. Ezio speaking across centuries to a man he'll never meet, acknowledging that his entire life is being watched by someone in the future. But here's the kicker. The Isu memory seals demonstrate that the Animus can decode non-genetic recordings embedded in first civilization devices. Not just memories passed through DNA, but data written directly into artifacts, which plants a question the franchise still hasn't fully answered. If the Animus can read nested simulations inside artifacts, how do we know reality itself isn't just another layer? At least 3.0 gives you an answer before it breaks your brain. Unlike what comes next, the Animus Omega, which takes everything intimate about genetic memory and turns it into cloud-hosted content that anyone can stream. Animus Omega. Desmond Miles dies in 2012 and becomes Netflix by 2013. Animus Omega is the first consumer-grade Animus, a VR headset Abstergo shipped to replace those old torture chairs with something you could actually sell to the public. In Black Flag's modern-day segments, you're a faceless research analyst in Montreal, strapping on an Omega headset to mine Edward Kenway's pirate memories for a video game project, which is already darkly funny because you, the player, are literally doing that. You are using Ubisoft's game engine to play as someone using Abstergo's game engine. The meta layer is thick and intentional, but here's the kicker. You have zero genetic connection to Edward Kenway, so how are you reliving his memories? Because Desmond's DNA was synced to the cloud. Black Flag strongly implies this through its narrative mechanics. After Desmond died, Abstergo uploaded his entire genetic record to their servers. Every ancestor, every memory sequence, every moment stored in his DNA is now a file on a hard drive. Animus Omega doesn't pull from your bloodline, it pulls from Abstergo's library. Desmond becomes content. His life, his ancestors, his heritage, packaged, indexed, and streamed to thousands of analysts like you're binge-watching a show, which means genetic memory is no longer personal, it's commercial. IP'd Omega is designed for scale. Compact, headset-based, no catheter required. You sit at a desk, put on the visor, and Abstergo's cloud infrastructure does the rest. And because users aren't descendants, Abstergo curates exactly which memories you see. They edit out the ugly parts, add narration that frames Templars as visionaries and assassins as terrorists, and turn history into propaganda dressed as edutainment. Most people never notice because it's fun, but it's still the same technology that broke Subject 16. Internal Abstergo documents list the risks: hippocampal shock, hallucinations, identity fracture, brain death. Helix health warnings confirm that extended Omega use causes permanent neural damage. Same bleeding effect, same horror, new packaging. Omega is the hinge. It's the moment Abstergo stops treating the Animus as a weapon and starts treating it as a platform. By 2014, Helix streams curated ancestor memories to anyone with an internet connection. Abstergo Entertainment becomes a media empire built on dead people's lives, and Desmond Miles is reduced to a content library they monetize. The satire is sharp. Abstergo is Netflix. Omega is your subscription. And every time you load up Edward Kenway's memories, you're participating in the exact system the assassins spent centuries fighting. But if streaming pirate memories through a corporate VR headset sounds dystopian, wait until you see what happens when Abstergo ships that same technology to India under a spiritually branded name, Brahmin VR. Abstergo doesn't just sell an Animus in India, they sell Brahmin, and that's not an accident. In late 2013, Abstergo strikes a deal with a company called Mysore Tech to distribute a consumer VR headset across the Indian market. It's marketed as entertainment, a way to explore your ancestors, a bridge to the past. The product is called Brahmin VR, not Animus India Edition, not Helix Southeast Asia, Brahmin, the ultimate reality in Hindu philosophy, now available as a sleek headset that mines your brain for genetic data while you think you're learning family history. Here's the thing, Brahmin VR is technically a localized rebrand of the Animus Omega and Animus VR lineage. The tech is the same, the risks are the same, the data harvesting is the same. What's different is the name, and the name is doing enormous cultural work. Abstergo is wrapping a surveillance tool in spiritually resonant language to make it feel safe, familiar, aspirational. It's the same playbook multinational corporations use when they want to sell invasive tech to populations that might otherwise be skeptical. And it works. Brahmin VR headsets connect to Abstergo's Helix cloud servers, meaning every person who buys one to explore Indian history is also uploading their genetic data straight into Abstergo's database. You think you're the customer, you're the product. The headset tracks cortex activity, monitors hippocampal response, logs synchronization behavior, all while you're immersed in memories Abstergo has edited to fit their narrative. And because this is a consumer device distributed where tech regulation may be less robust than in Western markets, the health risks are being deployed at scale with minimal oversight. The lore around Brahmin VR mostly comes from the Assassin's Creed Brahmin comic, which uses the device to explore Indian history, colonial power, and Isu artifacts. It's not as widely known as the flagship games, but it serves a crucial function. It shows Abstergo casting a global net. They're not just mining European Renaissance bloodlines. They're after every corner of the world where powerful genetic memories might be hiding. Brahmin VR is proof that the Helix infrastructure is planetary, but if you think a regionally branded VR headset is unsettling, wait until you hear about the cloud platform that ties all of this together and turns ancestral memory into the most profitable surveillance operation in human history, Helix. Helix is not a physical device. It is the cloud-based software and server ecosystem released publicly in 2014 that becomes the backbone of all Abstergo genetic memory operations, functioning like a combination of Google Drive and Netflix for DNA. Store it remotely, stream it to any compatible client, collect behavioral and neural telemetry in the background. It integrates with every consumer Animus product, meaning the platform aggregates data from all of them simultaneously, building what lore explicitly calls a giant DNA database of ordinary consumers. The Trojan horse is a product called Explore DNA, marketed as a family ancestry service, which surreptitiously uploads users' genetic memories to Helix servers, a direct fictional mirror of real-world concerns about consumer DNA testing companies selling genetic data to third parties. Except here, the data is not just saliva and chromosomes. It is your ancestors' entire lived experiences, ready to be mined, edited, and sold. Technical language buried in Helix health disclosures reveals the actual scope: fMRI Omega technology, cortex monitoring, occipital ghosting, hippocampal shock. These are not abstract terms. They describe a platform that can monitor and manipulate brain activity at a distance, while users think they are playing a historical adventure game. Your consciousness is being mapped, your neural responses logged, your emotional states cataloged. And because it runs on the cloud, Abstergo controls the entire stack. They can update your software, patch your memories, insert new content, all without you noticing. Public-facing Helix games are curated propaganda. Abstergo chooses which historical periods to present, edits out inconvenient truths, casts Templars as noble, and packages rebellions as terrorism. But hacker collective Erudito actively infiltrates the platform to insert subversive memories and expose the manipulation. The result is a battlefield hidden in plain sight, fought inside simulations most users assume are just entertainment. You think you are watching history. You are watching a corporate-approved version of history, sanitized and monetized, designed to make you sympathize with authoritarian control. Helix's architecture feeds directly into the Animus hub announced for Assassin's Creed Shadows, integrating multiple games and a centralized modern-day narrative into a unified launcher. In-universe infrastructure and real-world Ubisoft product strategy converging in the same object. The thing you launch on your PlayStation or PC to start an Assassin's Creed game is, canonically, the same platform Abstergo uses to harvest DNA from billions of people. The Animus started as a machine one man was strapped into. Helix is something billions swim in without noticing, which is, not ideal. Animus HR4. The HR line represents Abstergo's push into portable field-deployable neural interfaces. HR8, the most documented entry, is described in Origins as a suitcase-sized portable Animus for on-site operations. HR4 is an earlier iteration in the same product line, likely bulkier and more reliant on invasive procedures, but designed with the same core goal: bring the Animus to the DNA, not the other way around. Here's where it gets weird. Earlier Animus models required epidural connections, a direct interface to the subject's spine. Later HR models replace this with a hematological connection, transmitting the simulation through the user's bloodstream, which the brain interprets as reality. The simulation is traveling through your circulatory system while your brain assembles it into coherent memory, not projected onto a screen, not beamed into a headset coursing through your blood. An Animus 1 in 28 prototype developed in 2002 by Abstergo's Philadelphia branch is noted as more stable and providing better control over the bleeding effect, establishing the long research trajectory that eventually produces the HR line. HR4 sits somewhere in this arc, past lab chair experimentation, but before the suitcase refinement of HR8, likely still using epidural taps, likely still requiring significant medical oversight, but mobile enough to deploy outside corporate facilities. Field deployment changes the risk calculus entirely. Variable power, unstable connections, limited medical support, and the possibility of bleeding effect onset with no clinical team on standby. HR4 sessions would be shorter, more targeted, and more dangerous per session than controlled lab work. The machine has to go to the tomb, the crime scene, the dig site. The conceptual shift the HR line introduces is massive. The Animus can travel to physical residues of the past rather than forcing subjects to come to static machines. This sets the stage for characters like Layla Hassan to access DNA from ancient remains at remote locations, collapsing the distance between excavation and simulation. History stops being something you transport to a lab. It becomes something you decode on location. Evidence for HR4 specifically is inferred from naming conventions and the documented HR8 trajectory. The arc is clear. Abstergo spent over a decade miniaturizing Animus hardware, swapping spinal taps for bloodstream interfaces, and pushing the tech into the field. HR4 is one step in that evolution. Not the finish line, but proof they were willing to risk unstable, dangerous sessions if it meant reaching DNA they couldn't access any other way. But if portable field units are radical, wait until you see what happens when Abstergo scales back up, bolting the Animus onto a full industrial arm and handing a portable version to a single researcher operating entirely outside the rules. Animus Model 4.3. By 2016, Abstergo produces a radical internal redesign, a room-sized mechanical arm that moves the user's body in three-dimensional space to align their physical motion with their ancestors. Picture a full-sized industrial robotic arm with a person strapped to it, moving through the air as their ancestor fights a war 2,000 years ago. This is proprioceptive synchronization, not just visual immersion. The machine closes the gap between what your body feels and what the simulation depicts, reducing the dissonance that earlier static chairs could only fake. It's a logical endpoint for a technology obsessed with perfect synchronization, and it looks exactly as unsettling as it sounds. Simultaneously, Abstergo employee Layla Hassan receives her own portable Animus and begins using it without her superior's approval to access DNA from ancient remains in the field. The machine has evolved to the point where a single researcher can carry it to a remote site, extract viable DNA from bones or tissue, and stream a full simulation on site. No lab, no descendant, just a corpse and a briefcase. This is the shift from lineage-based access to artifact-based access, and it changes everything. History is no longer mediated by living descendants. It becomes a set of simulations any equipped operator can inhabit by finding the right DNA in the right ruins. Every excavation site is now a potential Animus terminal. Layla's portable Animus accesses Bayek of Siwa's memories from circa 48 BCE, over 2,000 years old. The machine can leap across millennia to access memories embedded in ancient remains, making archaeology a strategic arms race between Abstergo and the assassins. Whoever gets to the site first gets to own that piece of history. The scale of worlds this generation unlocks is unprecedented. Ptolemaic Egypt, Classical Greece, Viking Age England, and Scandinavia. Not because the historical periods expanded, but because the machine can now interpolate vast amounts of plausible memory around key genetic nodes, filling in gaps the DNA alone couldn't recover. The Animus is guessing, extrapolating, building entire societies from fragments, and nobody tells you which parts are real and which parts are rendered filler. But here's where it gets dark. Layla's extended use leads to serious psychological strain, hallucinations, and ultimately a profound entanglement with Isu technology at Yggdrasil in Valhalla, proof that even 4th-generation safety improvements cannot fully contain the bleeding effect when a user pushes the machine to its absolute limits. She's brilliant, she's equipped with cutting-edge hardware, and it still destroys her. The further the Animus can reach into the past, the more it removes consent and context from the people whose lives are being simulated. Bayek never agreed to be entertainment. He never signed a release form. He's just data now, reassembled and replayed by strangers with agendas he would never understand. The defining breakthrough is the shift from lineage-based access to artifact-based access. History becomes a commodity extracted from tombs, not inherited through bloodlines. And that opens the door to something even more invasive: Aulus Drone Animus. The evidence here is thin, and that is kind of the point. No major game or widely cited official source uses the exact phrase Aulus Drone Animus with the same clarity that Animus Omega or Brahman VR appear in confirmed lore. This is a device that exists in the shadowy edges of the franchise, inferred rather than confirmed, and that mirrors exactly how Abstergo would want it: invisible, deniable, everywhere. The concept represents the logical endpoint of two converging trends: increasingly autonomous hardware platforms and increasingly cloud-driven simulation backends. Instead of a human sitting near the DNA source, a drone equipped with sampling tools collects genetic material from a site and relays it to Helix servers, which reconstruct the memory for operators at a remote location. War zones, deep archaeological sites, collapsed ruins, any location where Abstergo cannot send visible ground teams without raising questions. Drones silently scanning battlefields, tombs, and dig sites for residual DNA and ICU signatures, feeding that data back to analysts who virtually walk through centuries-old events without ever revealing a physical presence at the location. Here's where it gets complicated. Data quality constraints introduce serious new simulation risks. Contaminated samples, partial DNA, degraded genetic material from drone collection would all produce unstable reconstructions with higher rates of memory gaps and visual artifacts. The same Animus anomalies players encounter throughout Valhalla, now potentially caused by noisy drone-sourced data rather than straightforward software glitches. There is also the human cost on the other end. Remote operation shifts danger away from field personnel, sure, but the analysts running simulations on reconstructed drone-sourced memories are still fully immersed in someone else's genetic history, still subject to the bleeding effect, and now potentially vulnerable to hacked feeds or falsified genetic data entering the Helix ecosystem entirely undetected. A corrupted drone upload does not just crash a simulation. It could implant false historical memory into an operator who has no way of knowing the source material was compromised. That last part is the one nobody talks about. As a concept rather than a confirmed device, the Aulus Drone Animus is the franchise's clearest signal of where Abstergo is heading, toward Animus infrastructure so distributed, automated, and invisible that genetic memory can be collected and consumed without a single human ever being physically present at either end of the process. The ultimate expression of memory as pure extractable resource, harvested like data from a server farm. Look at the arc, from Desmond strapped to a table with a needle in his arm in 2012, to an autonomous drone silently harvesting DNA from a ruin and uploading it to a remote analyst who never leaves their chair. No field teams, no visible operations, no human footprint at either end. That compression is the entire evolution of the Animus summarized in one device that may not even officially exist yet, and that honestly is more unsettling than anything we know for certain. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.